Haven't got a lot of time. This is the glamour of always being in a hurry. Okay. Let's see here. Our schedule. What does our schedule say? We are now dealing with glamours of rays 4, 5, 6, and 7. And the thing that I want to make sure we get to do, probably what we're going to do is we're going to start our small group work a little earlier, so that there is going to be more time for the actual glamour formula meditation, which I think will be useful for us all to go through together here after having experience. So now we'll only take, well, we're on time actually. We'll only take about 14 minutes or 13, 14 minutes per glamour. And then we'll go into the small group work. So we're going to begin with the fourth ray. Fourth ray, rays of attribute glamours.
And you keep the time.
What do?
You keep the time.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
I'll do it.
So the fourth ray is very important in that sense when we think about that the whole humanity is under the fourth ray. So we can reflect this ray or the glamours when we are studying individually. Also we can reflect the problems which are going on in the world. So he says, fourth ray people are peculiarly prone to fall into glamour and thus to produce a condition which is one of the extreme difficulty. I might define their problem by saying that they tend to bring their illusions down to the astral plane and there clothe them with glamour and have consequently a double problem upon their hands. This is interesting. They are faced with the unification of glamour and illusion. So we think about the fourth ray, the idea of the harmony through conflict. So there are always these two opposites involved with the fourth ray. They are, however, the group of souls which will eventually reveal the true nature of intuition, and this will be the result of their illusory glamours, fight in the world of appearances. So that then we also see that the goal for the whole humanity is to reveal intuition. And that's why we have those deep conflicts. So, 1. The glamour of harmony, aiming at personal comfort and satisfaction. I think that we, who actually here has the strong fourth ray? And you know that because you feel it, if there is disharmony, it's so unpleasant place to be. You try to get rid of whatever cost to get the harmony. But there is this wisdom of the soul that this harmony belongs to the life, and it has to be stood. It's a certain kind of fires which then will bring the point into the harmony, and the harmony will be in the end. The clamor of war. And if we think about those souls which has a strong sixth ray, which is related also to war, and you think about again the elementals, the elemental life is such kind of life which tries to continue its own similar course. It just continues it. So this the clamor of war. When we think about in big sense in the world, real wars, but then this battling energy, which is somehow inherent in the conditions that there are really people who cannot be without battling. They just create it. There is totally no necessity for that, and suddenly it is there because it's their natural place to be. The clamor of conflict with the objective of imposing righteousness and peace. Well, the conflict, yes, we cannot go the life through without conflicts. It has to be, because it is also the certain real sign of the soul possibility. But to rest in that conflict, not want to find the solutions. And there we see the glamour. Whenever we stop the solution coming into picture, we are just in that glamorous world. And somehow, maybe all of us who have the strong fourth ray, we can see that when we think about the undeveloped fourth ray and this conflict, the tendency of conflict, because the conflict gives also this kind of a clamor of that something is happening. There's something going on, and that's lovely that something is going on. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, the peace. So I fight for. I want peace, and I will fight for it.
Exactly.
And that is one of those things. You see many of those groups which are so furious because they want that peace. Mm-hmm. They push the peace, and they demand the peace with all cost. Okay. But then when you see the people who have been developed a very high fourth ray, how these people are so what is the word when you are skillful with their words, how they like dive into the harmony because they have learned how to use the polar opposites. The glamour of vague artistic perception. Oh, well, I was thinking about that because I don't exactly, I think I don't exactly understand this, but I think it is something about that the artistic type sees the world in certain ways, and this personal way to impose it forward, to want it so much that it forces into these glamorous situations that one cannot see realistically. The glamour of psychic perception instead of intuition. Oh, this is a glamour itself. Mm-hmm. And it's going on because there is also very strong relationship to speech in the fourth ray. And these giving those messages, all kinds of instructions, but because it is coming from one's own psychic realm and lacking this intuition, it can lead to all kinds of chaos, real chaos. The glamour of musical perception, and I think that is also the sensitivity of the vibrations, but because when we are glamored, so we tend to strengthen these personal vibrations, even though in the depth of the purpose there is this harmony which the music actually is indicating that one is able to harmonize all the notes that one has. The glamour of pairs of opposites. Am I in correct place now?
Yeah, pairs of opposites in the higher sense. Yes.
In the higher sense, and that is one of the biggest fights in us, to really harmonize these two opposites in several means, in the personal soul. And monadic, so it goes on, and it does not end in our world of the personality. And those warring places where the fourth ray loves to be, when there are, even though the tent of this whole idea of the fourth ray is to bring forth all these opposites into the harmonious place, but when it is not developed, then it is this fantastic battle which is going on everywhere, and these frictions everywhere. It gives like life, and there is really, I think it was Gog, one Gog who was saying that somebody wanted to help him, and then he was really desperate about that. So from where then I can create the art if the pain is taken away. So there's something about that the fourth ray who needs to be in this place of friction, but then it creates the glamour as well because the others does not need to be in that place. What the fourth ray is bringing forward. I think that there is this, when you go, Michael, forward, there were this, let us look this because they are very good. The confused combat, the realization of that which is high and that which is low, the darkness which proceeds from expression, the veiling of the intuition, the sensing of inharmony and cooperation with the part and not the whole, identification with humanity, the fourth creative hierarchy, undue recognition of that which is produced by speech, abnormal sensitivity to that which is not self, constant points of crisis. Do you find yourself? Nobody.
Only if you're a human being.
Yeah, I think we find ourselves in that.
You know, I'm reminded here of Dylan Thomas. He was a great Welsh poet, so much fourth ray, you know. He wrote that wonderful play called Under Milkwood. And he was reputed to have, he drank himself to death, you know. Incredible, such a poet. He said, "Isn't life terrible? Thank God." You know, this is a real fourth ray perspective. And you know how it is, some people just love to fight. I don't know, I've never been in an Irish bar yet. But I understand that a good Donnybrook, you know, where everybody just finally lets loose and every confused combat and everybody's hitting everybody else, doesn't make any difference who you hit as long as you're fighting. You know.
Is this a private fight or can anyone?
Can anyone join? Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Is this a private fight or can anyone join? You know. So the spirit of resistance, you know, the little warring elemental, the fourth ray mental body, we all have this, and of course he says that the lower part of the fourth ray is the conflict part, obviously, and then the higher part is coming to a rightful harmony. But if you try to impose that harmony first before you've worked out the conflicts, then it's always seething underneath and you have no true harmony at all. About the glamour of musical perception, I had something to say about that, but I forgot. He does say the fourth ray type loves to carry a tune. You know, the fourth ray man loves a tune. And it's just like living in your own parallel world, which is all melodies and all music, and it's just a question of how much reality you have about life, you know. Artistic perception is wonderful, but can you relate to how things are as well as how things appear? So this is the question. Okay, well, I'll just say, anyway, I assume that you have a little bit in yourself that might relate to these things, perhaps. Or is there no one here with any fourth ray? Who are the hands who can relate to fourth ray glamours? Anybody? Oh God, a few human beings among us. I'm so happy. Okay. All right, I'll say a little bit about the fifth and sixth rays, and Livy will finish off with the seventh ray, and then we'll get into our groups and we'll see whether, you know, this affects us and what we notice. Having a glamour is one thing, and then doing something about it is another. Okay. All right, so fifth ray. Right. Okay, the glamour of materiality. Well, you know, overemphasis on form. So, you know, the fifth rays are wonderful with what they concentrate on, but they shut out so much. So this is very sense-bound. It's very involved with the... it's affected a lot by Vulcan, which is a very material planet, and it's just wanting to focus exclusively on the testimony of the five senses. Matter of fact, Mars is very involved in this type of glamour. It does rule the concrete mind. It does rule orthodox science. It rules that, and it produces a cleavage with the rest of reality. So every time when we overemphasize something, the value of the part of over the whole, the value of the senses, the physical senses over something that is more subtle and refined, we're going to be in glamour. That's materialism. It's a state of mind. is a very partial state of mind in which you emphasize only one thing and not another. So we're going to have some trouble with that during the age of Aquarius, which is a largely fifth ray age, at least among some people. The glamour of the intellect. Well, intellect is very important, but it's only a part, right? Again, only a part. Other instruments and vehicles of apprehension are discounted and ignored. We used to have, I don't know if it still exists, but we used to have some students in the University of the Seven Rays, women who had skeptical husbands. Have you ever heard of such a thing? The skeptical husband. Or possibly the skeptical wife. I don't know. Maybe that's a rarer phenomenon. Oh dear, do whatever you want, I just don't believe it. You know, that kind of thing. So the intellect is great, but it's not the whole story. Yeah, okay. The glamour of knowledge and definition. Oh, as long as I can define it, it's real, you know. But you define it in narrow mental terms, and the true nature and value of what is observed is missing. It's just the outer definition. It's good up to a point, but it's not the whole story. As a matter of fact, partiality, you know what I mean by that? Partiality is particularly emphasized in the fifth and sixth ray, maybe to an extent the seventh, but fifth and sixth, they are the very narrow focus in a certain way, very intense, very narrow, very partial, but they certainly can see something when they really, really focus. The glamour of assurance based upon a narrow point of view. I have a friend, one, who is he's a brilliant philosopher and scientist, and we have conversations, and you know, I was in Berlin and we were having conversations. He says, oh no, 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 no. You know, this is how he addressed when I'm talking about esoteric. No, 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 no. He's completely assured of his fifth ray point of view. Very brilliant guy, you know. I'm making inroads. Okay, anyway, you know, Saturn will help. He's a Sag, you know, so when Saturn is in Sagittarius, you know, it'll help. Okay, so this is, you're sure of your glamours. That's the amazing thing. You hold desperately to them. You know they are true, and that's why they're so hard to penetrate. So you're only seeing the part, you value the part, you're convinced that the part is of importance, and the concrete mind slays the real, and you don't see things the way they really are. So DK says the first thing you got to do is blast the person wide open. This is the word he used, blast the person. This is what the masters do, and make them insecure about their point of view. Because you've got to shatter that false, narrow assurance before any other possibilities can get in. The glamour of the form which hides reality, well, you know, more of the same, right? It's fundamental to the ray type. There's the exclusion of the real. Interesting here, the glamour of organization, not in the seventh ray. But fifth ray types are well organized, of course. The lines between things are perceived as hard and fast. Everything in its place. This is this, that is that, this is not this is not that. Arrangements and classifications are made on the basis of perceived demarcations. Your boundary ends here, my boundary ends here, this begins here or that. It's illusion. There's no flow of the presence from one thing to another. The factor of fusing and blending is not there. So, you know, just keep everything like, you know, don't destroy my list. I know how the animals of the earth are classified, and I know their Latin names, and they are exactly this and not that, and don't come along with some other idea. Okay, the glamour of the outer, which hides the inner. It's just obvious, isn't it? There's a special kind of blindness here, partial vision, and of course, it's so real. And all of you spiritual people, you're just full of vagaries and nothing real in your life at all. Look, this is real. This is concrete. What are you chasing after? Nothing. You know, so there are people who have said this to us on occasion, I'm sure. Okay, so that's Ray 5. Does anybody feel so hard-headed as to identify with any of these? I love to define things, I do, you know, yeah. I mean, this is real, that's not real, you know. What are you chasing after? Okay, good. It's always good to admit to your glamours, unless you have the glamour of admitting to your glamours and expecting appreciation for it on top of it. Okay, do you have a question, Michael?
Michael, the recent, in the last few years,
yeah,
coming together of the theoretical and the experimental physicist over the age
Yeah.
of discovery and apparent validation.
Yeah.
Is that at a cosmic level, is that a healing of...
They're breaking out of this. They're breaking out of the stuff that I'm talking about. Absolutely. There are these wonderful people who are using the higher fifth ray, which leads you into uncertainty, interestingly enough, right? The glamour of so much certainty with the fifth ray, and before you know it, we have the uncertainty principle, and we have certain kinds of situations which don't seem logical anymore, action at a distance. They're breaking out of this. So it'll happen, and it's happening right now. But there are a lot of very hard-headed people. You know, when you combine the sixth ray and the fifth ray together, you can really get incredible theologian, a dogmatist. It's only this way. And then they, you know, I remember some of these guys, the inerrancy of the Bible. The impossibility that any word in the Bible is not absolutely, literally, and completely, concretely true. I'm remembering Jerry Falwell lecturing on this kind of thing, you know. It's a special limitation, isn't it? Ray 5 and Ray 6, yeah. The inerrancy of decay, absolutely. He said it, you know. He said it. But, you know, he had Alice Bailey. So if we don't like what he said, Alice Bailey said it. You know. You know how it goes. Right. DK, he's such a nice second-rate master, he just couldn't have said that. You know.
It must have been a weak moment in Bailey's interpretation.
It was, she just went out of alignment, you know. Yeah, that's it. All right. Anyway, nice things here. You can check it out, Esoteric Psychology, page 42. But I want to make sure you have plenty of time to talk about your own glamours, if you've managed to detect any. We'll have a special group for the people who have no ticks on their sheet. The glamourless group. The glamour of having transcended all glamours. Working on illusion these days, unlike you emotionally polarized people. Okay, anyway, here we go, Ray 6, and this is a hotbed of glamour here. The glamour of devotion. Well, there's nothing wrong with devotion, you know. I mean, the monad is devotion, Lord of ceaseless persevering devotion. The soul has incredible devotion. But, you know, is the devotion to the part or to the whole? The value of the part in normal devotion is so overemphasized over the value of the many parts in relation to each other. Now, eventually, you know, come forward to the mountain blue and on that mountain learn the invocation of a Savior. The sixth ray does widen out eventually, and then includes all these beautiful things, but not in the beginning. So there's nothing wrong with devotion as long as it doesn't warp your vision, emphasizing the value of one thing over another when they might be equal in value or something else might be better. So, you know, you fasten on a thing with the sixth ray and then you just give it all you got and it becomes the most important thing in your field of vision. And it's not really from a wider point of view. The all-seeing eye doesn't see it that way, but we do with our emotional grip and our narrow point of view, and that's got to be the only thing, you know. So you can see how it's a narrow point of view. The glamour of adherence to forms and persons, same idea. As long as you're so attached to some formal issue, you can never see the whole, you can never see reality. The glamour of idealism. Well, look, the soul has idealism too. The monad came down because of idealism. A very high quality on the atomic plane is idealism, isn't it? Not emotional idealism, but there's something up there on the atomic plane that's called idealism. But this is a distortion. The ideal is important, but it can prevent one from seeing conditions as they really are. One lives in the possibility rather than taking into account the actuality. So there's a split in consciousness. Oh, if only it were like this, if only this was happening, this were happening, what about reality? And there's a split between things as they actually are, and you can change them, and things as you wish they can be, and you never let them brush up against each other. The glamour of loyalties and creeds. We believe this, you know. I did a lot of musical work in churches, and we always had to recite the Apostles' Creed. This is what we believe, you know. Well, it's okay, you got to keep the sheep in order, but, you know, and each one of us has our own creed and loyalty, of course, but it's narrowing. Only this and not that. Not this, not that. So exclusivism arises. We believe this, we don't believe that. And before you know it, you can't have a holistic point of view. And only with a holistic point of view will there be reality. Okay. The glamour of emotional response. Well, okay, sentient response is allowed, but emotional response is often not, I can feel, but if I let a gush of emotion get in the way of my thought, I can't think clearly anymore, and I can't deal intelligently with things. So one cannot see things as they are through the waters of emotional response, and thus the grip of unreality upon the consciousness grows. I feel about it this way. I feel about it that way. But how is it really? I mean, with my mind. Do I see it as it is, or just as I like it or hate it? If I'm filled with loves and hates, I'm never going to see things as they really are. Okay, the glamour of sentimentality. Okay, he tells us that's one of the 4 things we have to get rid of before we do Rule 11, right? Non-sentimental response to all your group members, right? Okay, so the real value of someone or something is not understood. Kama manus is rules, and people and things are not seen in their true light. It's whether, he says, poor disciples, they're caught in the glamour of liking and disliking. That's sentimentality. Oh, I feel so nice about this. You know, it has nothing to do with its true value. It's just what it means to your emotional body. So you never have achieved pratyahara, never have stood back, never have seen the thing as it actually is. You're sentimental about it. Sentiency and mentality are together. It's kama manus, right? And we all know we have to break kama manus before we can see with any kind of clarity in the mind inspired by the soul. Oh, I love this one. One of my favorites. The glamour of interference. I've sometimes told this story. Assured that one's ideals only are correct, only your ideals are correct, one is emotionally prompted to interfere with the expression of others' values, so that one's ideals have no challenge or competition. Okay, now once I went to a doctor's office and I was really tired. So I closed my eyes. And the next thing I know, there's a very intense young woman poking me in the ribs. You're meditating, aren't you? I saw that. You're meditating. I said, it just was closing. No, you're meditating. And she was of the Christian persuasion. And I felt I'd been interfered with, just a little bit. I thought it was so much fun. But people, your wheel is spinning and they have the crowbar and they want to put that in your spokes, So, because they know better. They have the false assurance. They know. You don't know, they know, and they're going to help you know how they know. Well, it's all going on all over the world, we're going to believe as I believe. Accept the concrete mind as I see it. Accept my dogma or I'll kill you. This is going on with the Christians, with the Muslims, with the ancient Hebrews, but not so much there. But, oftentimes forced conversion is crazy. But it's based upon a self-assured, narrow point of view. Very dangerous because it's so self-assured. The glamour of the lower pairs of opposites. This is not so much the interaction between soul and personality and the intelligent assessment of the dynamics of that interaction, as it is the perceived conflict between sin and virtue. One conceives all life in terms of the temptations of life, and you're caught in a moralistic dilemma, moralistic judgment without understanding. Okay, now I'm close to God, now I'm far from God, now I'm sinning, now I'm good, it's all that fight back and forth between the good and the bad. And it's taking place within the person. I'm a good person, I'm a bad person, and I'm struggling all the time, instead of just being a person, and the observer. The Buddhists would have it, we're just caught in our emotions, we're not seeing anything. The glamour of world saviors and teachers. There's only one savior, and there's only one teacher. There's only one. You know it, I know it, we all know it, but you're deviating, okay. One teacher valued above all others, regardless of the true merits of the saviors and other teachers, obviously. What are we going to do about that? Well, people feel very assured. So this is tunnel vision, an extreme overemphasis upon one's guide, because it makes you feel so secure that you've got your system, your ideal, your teacher, and you're going to go to heaven forever and be happy. And you'll never be disturbed again. All right, if that's what you want. This means that there is a distortion and no real understanding of the larger field. The glamour of narrow vision, again, obvious, right? Yeah, narrow vision will lead to distortion. It can protect a young soul for a while. It's okay, because they'll do anything not to be confused. So at least focus on a few good things and keep focused on those things, but then don't denigrate and destroy everybody else's vision. And all visions are eventually allowed. And the glamour of fanaticism, your emotional intensity is so invested in a person or a pattern of limited value that you reject everything else, the realistic vision of the whole. You overemphasize just one thing, and you don't see reality, and you put every bit of your negative emotion into your fanaticism, so you don't have to deal with it, and you can reject everybody else, just and drive them away and be assured in your own. You put everybody else down, and you are assured of your own position. So there's a hotbed of glamours here in the sixth ray. Can anyone relate at all? Well, I bet, take us back a few hundred years, I bet we could really relate, But now we're enlightened. Okay, all right. Good. And these are pretty strict, because the sixth ray is not a good psychologist, usually, right? And therefore doesn't see himself, and therefore projects onto others all of these inner conditions, and only sees in the other person all his own faults. So it's tough to get sixth and fifth ray people, for different reasons, to see themselves along these lines. When Carl Jung was doing his psychological work, some of the toughest nuts to crack were the fifth ray scientific types. They were so assured, but then they'd have these dreams coming out of nowhere, and the psyche is interfering, so he could help them interpret. And then, of course, if you're a good sixth ray and you take away your ideals, you crash, and then you're in despair, and the tunnel closes down. So it's a very hard to handle thing. But we're all handling it, and we're moving from the 6 to the 2, and here are some nice things: violence, fanaticism, all that stuff. All right, now we will get on to a much nicer ray. So we think. Okay.
Okay, it's a nice segue. How many people here have 7th ray in your makeup? Okay, goodly amount. Good. Okay, well, yeah, and this will be good. Michael had added wonderful thoughts to the 2nd ray one, and I didn't have them, so I was going back and forth, but this is all together. So this one, the glamour of magical work. Self-reference is involved. Always where self-reference is involved, there is glamour. The manipulation and commanding of the powers makes one feel personally and unduly important. One views oneself at the center of the magical circle, somewhat like the 3rd ray spider in the center. One begins to think of oneself as the magical operator, as more important than the operation. Again, the part versus the whole. As all this becomes self-referencing, and whenever there is self-referencing without detachment, a very important key word about glamour. Whenever there is self-referencing without detachment, there is glamour. Okay, does that resonate with anyone?
I have a friend. I know you wouldn't think it could be possible, but I've got a friend in Africa. And I know he's on the 7th ray in a profound way. And, like Aleister Crowley and some of those guys, and I don't link my friend with them, it's possible to get so exalted in this 7th ray magical work, to just think of yourself as the center of power and manipulation and invocation, the things you can do and will do. It just is a big ego trip up to a point. A very dangerous thing, even on the nice 7th ray.
Another one is the glamour of the relation of opposites. This can involve sexuality or the bringing together of any opposites. The question arises, should the opposites which are brought together rightfully be brought to right? Should the opposites which are brought together rightfully be brought together? Michael, do you have a good example of this?
Well, you know, not really. It's easy. At the center I stand. I seek to bring the two together. The plan is in my hands. How shall I work? There's a way to bring things into relation that is sanctioned by the plan. And there's other things you bring into relation just through the power of bringing them into relation, and it's not sanctioned by the plan. It can be people, it can be things. It's just that love of fusing things together, but is it right? Is it rightfully done? And I'll think about concrete examples. It's not my specialty.
Okay. All right. The glamour of subterranean powers. One develops a sense of superiority over the lower powers that one can summon and command. There is an exaggerated sense of personal potency in this respect. So again, one's focusing on oneself, one's powers, and not focused on the work to be done that will be served by this initiative.
See, like for instance, Aleister Crowley, you know. How many of you have read Aleister Crowley? He's an interesting guy, okay, you know. It's interesting, you know, you don't necessarily want to go that way. He just loved to summon certain demons. Was it necessarily good that he did that? But he wanted the power of calling up the hellish forces just to prove he could do it. And he did it. And, you know, and it was a huge, huge glamour, you know. So he was buried in that for much of his life. Look how strong I am. I can summon the devil. Okay. Any point to it? Any plan value to it? No. I can do it. Dum da da.
Okay. Yeah.
Dum da da.
And then
Anybody have a different? I'm just imitating. Have a harmony?
Then there is also, this is not on. Anyway, there is not so bad example, but there are a lot of seventh grade people who are aligning so much of the elemental forces that the elemental forces, they are asking them to do this and that and that, and the whole group can be totally diluted because of these tiny elemental lives. For instance, in the table or in the machine, just does not want that we are sitting there or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, the minerals are speaking to me. Well, maybe so.
Yeah. And so this is kind of connected with an earlier one, the glamour of that which brings together. So a good task for a matchmaker, but the question is, does that which is brought together really serve a higher impersonal purpose? Or does it feed the pride of the one who is able to bring things together? So this is somewhat related.
Yeah.
Just because you could do it, should you do it?
Right, exactly.
The glamour of the physical body. And boy, do we see that today, don't we? Throughout our modern materialistic civilization, we do see this. In the modeling industry, aspirations to look like models. But really, television, the movies, magazines, everyone looks for this appearance that seems to be ideal, not taking into fact that there is photoshopping, and many of the actresses today are coming out, well, look, here's the real me, and here's this Photoshop picture of me. So we're creating this illusion of glamour that even the individuals can't live up to. So diet, exercise, appearance, makeup, clothes, all this emphasis on the outer, which is to the neglecting of what's really inside. The glamour of the mysterious and the secret. Well, now everybody loves a secret. But when it implies power, that you know things that someone doesn't, or you have power over elementals or power over others, or secrets, mysteries. All these things bring pride in yourself, and that self-focus and self-referencing is a glamour. It's a way of gaining control over others who are dazzled by what you're saying, and who are presumably more ignorant than you. And it allows you, if you're inclined then, to stay in this position of authority. You know, I know secrets and you don't.
Right.
This belongs to the secrets of initiation.
Oh, secrets of initiation.
I'm sorry, I just can't speak to you about that. It's one of the secrets of initiation, which I know, and unfortunately you do not. Okay, all right.
Although we did do a little live streaming, but you know, that was just to a select group. Yes, that glamour of the mysterious and secret. The next one, and we see this rampant in our society today as well, the glamour of sex magic, because sex sells. This type of magic is used throughout the advertising industry. The classic example is the beautiful semi-clothed model draped over a new sports car, or even a refrigerator, but that would be...
Whatever turns you on. To the kitchen, not to the car.
Yeah. Wrong association is established. The lure of sex is attached to secondary, ego-enhancing motives. Basically, we're dealing with power over others through the exploitation of the sex energy. And because ego is emphasized, the divine plan is not. And there again, it's not the whole, it's the partial, the individual. So using sex or ego to get power over others. And then the glamour of the emerging manifested forces. So something is precipitating, and the magical operator is the apparent cause of their precipitation. This exalts his own value in his own eyes and the eyes of others. This mixes the little self with something with which should be handled impersonally and for the greater good. So ego, once again, ego exaltation should have nothing to do with the ability to promote manifestation. So it is manifestation for the greater good, the greater whole, not look at the magic that I can do. So in summary, with all of these, well, first of all, does anybody see yourself in any of the 7 ray glamours? Yeah. And it's interesting that in all of the 7 glamours we've focused on, and there's so many more that we didn't touch on, many glamours of all kinds. But everywhere we see that there are some universal aspects to this. There is the love of one's own personality, ego. So ego is involved, or that of others. We can be devotedly focused on someone else's ego. The emphasis upon the lower self as if it were the real identity. The most important identity. So we're focusing on the not self and not the soul, the higher self. And we have an investment of the emotions in some kind of glamorous enterprise. So glamour is distorted vision, registered and distorted values. This is important. Distorted vision, distorted values, focused on the partial, focused with attachment and personal energy. These are some of the things that cause glamour. And emotionally or desirously emphasizing the non-essential and missing often the big picture, the important work to be done. It arises from a distorted vision of the world and thus a distorted sense of values. It is harmful rather than harmless. We could say, oh, it's just one of my little quirks. But it is harmful, especially if you are a disciple, a spiritual student, because rather than being based on a proportional vision of things, you're really missing the importance of the whole and the value of the work to be done. So you're focusing on the particular and not the greater. So these are things found in all of the glamours, these basic perspectives that limit us and that create this fog of illusion on the astral plane that hold us really in such bondage that we cannot have the light penetrate in discernment and have any sense of what is real and is of value. And it affects us, but as we work on dispelling that, we qualify ourselves to then take on world glamour. And it also benefits us so much because it helps us in our next step along the path. And our subject has been initiation, and this is important work for us to do individually towards that goal. And then it qualifies us for group work, this higher group work together to help work in this experiment to help dispel world glamour that is holding our world in such limitation. It is found everywhere in all countries, and this is such a critical time for humanity that we need to try to address it and do something now together.
Good, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, everybody, we are going to have exactly 1 hour. Okay? So, Jeff, would you handle people in the corner? Helena, maybe you can have a group that's right over here. Heidi, would you go in that corner? Let's see, I don't know if Dwayne is with us.
For lunch.
Sheldon.
No,
Okay, Sheldon, good.
Oh, he's
Sheldon,
inviting everybody.
let's see, we can have one group there. Sheldon, you take a group where Heidi is now. Heidi, you go over there. And Livy, you can use that corner. And Tuya, you can use this right here, okay? So now, let the facilitators go to their positions and join them. You should have about 5 in each group, okay?
Ooh. Oh, sorry.
Eva, you can handle one too. Would you like to handle one, or would you want to go?
Are you taking this away?
Pull a chair around, pull a chair.
We don't have any camera. Do you see the light?
I'm gonna hit the shutter.
Okay. Over here with Eva. We need a couple more people. Have a chair.
Shutter. One below
You can
that.
turn off the, you can turn this off, thank you. Now the idea is, bring a chair, don't sit on the floor, the glamour of humility. All right. Yeah, just gather close around. Or Victoria, you're trying to be between two things.
Oh, I'm fine. Oh, I see.
Yes, I give you slight instructions. There are no real instructions here. The idea is that you've gone through the registration of some glamours. And you have noticed maybe some kinship your psyche has to maybe a couple, 3 of these glamours. Talk about the list of the glamours that you have in front of you in terms of what affects you most and why. That's all. And maybe what you're doing to overcome it, you know. But how do you know you have this glamour? How do you know? And you can talk about it that way. It's just very easy. Very easy. Boy, that's okay. Does everybody have, okay, good? We're good? Is there a problem? Oh, a question. Yeah. Yeah. What's it?
Called the Glamour futility. Would that be a second ray?